Hello, everyone. My name is Alya AlZarouni, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of DIFC Authority. I have with me today Dame Susan Rice, a prominent British banker, head of the Scottish Fiscal Commission, and the first female leader of a British clearing bank, and a mother of three as well. So, Susan, I'm really humbled and honored to have you with us today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And for me, it's humbling just to be talking to you here.
Okay, so Susan, I'd like to hear more about your career journey. I find it really interesting that you studied biology and philosophy, and you had a late shift in your career from that sector to finance. So, if you can tell us more about it.
Yes, so I started out in what I don't always call a career because I've really had a number of different jobs in different industries, but started out as a research scientist in a university. Then I went into more general role, and this was over in America, in a couple of universities, and then found that I would be, and the family would be moving to New York City, so a very different workplace. And I thought, I won't ever have as good a job as I was enjoying at the moment. I should do something different. I spoke to some people who were on the boards of a couple of universities I know. They were all based in New York City, and they were all in finance. And a couple of them said, come down, speak to my colleagues, we'll give you a job in a bank. Well, this was nothing I was trained for, but I thought, well, take the job for a year, get myself settled in the new place, and then see what I want to do. And as they say, the rest is history. I never left finance.
Okay, so when you did that big shift, and it happened late in your career, was there any connection between philosophy and science and finance?
So I think the scientific training had and continues to have some real impact on how I approach business and challenges, and indeed management in the business world. You learn in science to run experiments. You have a hypothesis. You have a few variables. You vary them, and you see what comes out. You see if something works or not. And that is really translatable into a business situation, and actually allows you to say to your organization, I'd like to innovate. I'd like to try something a little different. It will be controlled. And I can tell you now, if it doesn't work, the most I will lose is such and such. So bear with me, and I can make it work. So I think that came through. Philosophy came through in a different way because that was all about asking questions. And because I was always going into different jobs in different organizations, I would go into something where I was ignorant, not stupid, but ignorant. I didn't have the knowledge. And I learned very quickly I couldn't pretend I knew something I didn't know. So I would go to my colleagues, people around me, and I'd ask them questions. And that really was out of that philosophical training that I could just ask them, explain this to me. What do you think? What happens next? What are the issues? And that has also continued with me in terms of a style.
Okay, this is amazing, really, how you were able to shift from a totally different sector and how that actually helped with your career progression in the other sector. So, Susan, you had number of firsts in the finance sector for women. You were able to break so many glass ceilings, break the mold in a male-dominated sector. So tell us more about the challenges that you faced and how were you able to do that?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. And I've been asked that before. And I often say to people, I know we all talk about glass ceilings. But my goodness, would you or I want to be sitting surrounded by all that broken glass? So I think what I've done, and I would certainly urge other women and anyone actually, is to look at where the barriers are, understand where there's a barrier, even a perceived one. And if you want to do something, go around it. You don't stand and wait for it to break. You go around it and get to the other side of it. I think one of the things that I believe worked in my favor in finance is that I was always slightly different, particularly when I first went into banking. I mean, the number of times I was the only woman around the committee table, in the board, the only voice. And I had to learn how to get my voice heard. And that is, and there's been research about this, that's sometimes hard for women. We tend by nature, and this is done from research, to wait until someone finishes speaking and then we say what we want to say. Men, without meaning to be rude, tend to interrupt. And I found myself after some years that I was interrupting all the time. But you have to learn to have your voice heard, and sometimes you have to say, the man sitting next to me didn't make that suggestion. I made that suggestion. That was hard for me to do. But I think the other thing is that I have never taken a career decision thinking, is this going to be good for Susan Rice? I mean, I just don't think like that. I've taken these other roles and done these other things because they look really interesting to me, and because I love the excitement and the little bit of fear when you jump into the unknown. So I would urge other women as well to do that. And because you may be a little different around the table, you actually have the ability to come out with your own ideas. People say, oh yeah, she's a little different, and then they start listening.
Okay. So I guess you were driven by passion, really. Do you think women bring in a different perspective to the table?
So it's always very hard to generalize for all women, but I would have to say in some respects, yes. I think that there are different perspectives. And very interesting, there's research that just came out quite recently about last year, 2022, and about why, I think this was in the US, very senior people were leaving organizations to go to new jobs in other organizations. And the dominant reason why men left was because they could get a better salary. The dominant reason why women left was because they wanted to be recognized more fully, more appropriately. And so that speaks to different drivers for men and for women. There's been a lot of research around there, but I do think that different voices really matter, and women have the chance to be, particularly in finance, a different voice.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think women have different way of thinking and different perspective. So what advice would you give to young women who would like to pursue a career in finance?
Well, first of all, I would say my advice to almost anyone in career terms is go where life takes you. So sometimes you're on a path and you're on a career ladder and you're getting up the next rung and the next rung, and you don't look on either side and you miss some really good opportunities. So I would say to young women, just listen and learn and go outside of your comfort zone. Just see what's happening. And if someone asks you to take on an assignment that you don't know that you're fully qualified for, give it a go. Because chances are, if you're willing to work hard and you want to focus on it, you'll do pretty well. I had something, again, this goes back to my early days in banking, where the institution I worked for came and said, the regulators have come up with a lot of new regulation, and they're being really robust about challenging banks. This was all about doing retail banking in disadvantaged communities and poor communities. And I was basically told, would you take this on as an assignment, talk to the regulators, find out what they want, and just put us in a good place. And that was all I was told. So I took it on, but actually this was a fascinating world because it was like developing a new market where banks hadn't been operating. And so you can take an assignment that sounds a bit funny and turn it into something that's really exciting. That grew into a lot of economic development work, into new products, into new networks, and ultimately winning some awards for the work done. So I didn't do just what the regulators were saying. I found out what it was they wanted to achieve and then found a way to do that.
Okay, amazing. So basically, it's an endless learning journey for you. Yes. So Susan, do you have any interesting stories that you would like to share with us where you faced gender-related challenges in the workplace?
So I think the biggest one is possibly what I referred to was actually having my voice heard. And I wasn't even aware that that this wasn't happening. But I vividly remember sitting at a meeting, and the man sitting next to me was a company lawyer, but he was a really nice man, and I knew him a bit. And I remember him saying in a conversation, "I didn't say that, Susan said that." And I thought, oh my goodness, that's absolutely right. I would just sit there meekly, whatever. But I don't look for instances where there are issues. I've worked earlier in my career for, I had bosses who, when I look back at it, clearly didn't think very much of the fact that I worked for them, but I just did as good a job as I could and then moved on. It's hard for me just to pinpoint. There are instances. I think sometimes salary and compensation has been not as generous along the way. That hasn't been my big driver, but I've become aware of that, and it's annoying. but you're there doing the work because you want to achieve something, and that's really what I've aimed for.
Okay, so it's interesting that women always have different priorities when it comes to work than men do.
Yes, they may do. Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
So this takes me to I think the last question today, and that's about, so you've been working your entire life, and you were at some point a mother of 3 young kids. Do you think work-life balance exists?
So when you think of balance, you think of an old-fashioned scale, where it's balanced on both sides. That doesn't exist at all. Sometimes it's way down here, sometimes it's way down there. But it is possible, I think, to have a career, and indeed, as the chief executive of any institution, that is a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure, and it can be quite lonely as well. You don't have anyone else in your organization you can really just sit down and worry with, because they all work for you. So that takes a lot from you. But I found with my children a couple of things. One is, when they were younger, I spent all of my salary on childcare, whether in the house or nursery. A lot of people feel somehow that should be given to them. Well, I wanted to work, and I could work and earn money, but I spent it all to make sure they were well looked after. As they got older, I always took them into my office. I think it's really important for them to see where you are, to see the desk you sit at. And I talked to them about the work I've done. And some of that had been played back to me in teacher conferences. I don't know if those happen everywhere, but they certainly happen in the West. Parents speak to teachers about their children, and the teacher would say, well, your son or your daughter told us about work you're doing in this particular area. And you could find the ways that children become quite proud of their parents. So you may not be spending all your time with them, but if they know what you're doing and they know something about what you're doing, it gives them a great sense of pride and feeling somehow they're related to the contribution that you're making. I also used to find, particularly when they were little and I'd come home from work at the end of the day, there is nothing better than opening the door and having a little one just come running at you, so happy to see you. And I learned how to turn off or compartmentalize the work, if at all possible, and really focus on the children. So the time that I have had with them growing up, and even now, we're really good friends, all of them. They are with each other, and I am with them. I can turn off what might be on my mind and really focus in their world. So that ability to focus, almost like an athlete, to move your mind, is really important.
Yes, and really making sure that the time you spend with them is well spent and
It's a good
focused on
time.
them.
Yeah.
Yes. I totally agree that I think having your kids proud, feeling proud of the work that you do is the biggest motivation for all of us
Yes.
as women.